So do you think Americans are willing to die to get Trump into office, or for that matter, to get him out of office? Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. I mean, there are some very real and very serious challenges that we're all facing, frankly. But as we're watching the how about that? As we're watching the Donald Trump campaign for president, and literally every single day now, it used to be 2-3 times a week, now it's every single day, I'm getting an email from Donald Trump offering to sell me a coloring book, offering to send me a certificate for my wall, offering to send me, I mean, just all kinds of stuff. And one of the things I'm noticing is that while they all look the same, like they've all got the same Trump-Pence logo and all this kind of stuff, that actually there's a bunch of different groups that are sending them. I mean, one is from a super PAC, one is from a merchandise company. Now, these are all apparently groups that are owned by or managed by Donald Trump or to the benefit of the Trump and the Trump families. But only a few of them are actually raising money for the campaign, as far as I can tell. It's fascinating. But I think more broadly, the contours of Donald Trump's reelection strategy are finally coming into view. And as we're about to hit 100,000 dead Americans in all probability today, he's doubling down. He's basically saying 100,000 dead, hey, we could go for 1 million dead. I mean, functionally, it appears that his strategy is the old Hancock strategy from the UK. Boris Johnson's former health minister, or current former health minister, Matthew Hancock, if I'm remembering his name correctly, was herd immunity. Let's get enough people infected that we've got herd immunity. Now, this was also Sweden's idea, and they thought, okay, cool, we'll get, because herd immunity is, between 50 and 70% of the population has it, and what that means is, or has had it, is immune to it. And what that means is that, a few people can get sick here and there, but, they're going to bounce up against people who are already immune, so it's not going to keep spreading, right? That's the whole theory. And then Sweden did some pretty good antibody testing recently. The original antibody testing was not so good because there's 3 different proteins that it was looking at, and 2 of those proteins are shared by regular common cold viruses, what's called the HCOV number 43 and number 2, which are the 2 primary human cold viruses, just common cold that are floating around. They have 2 of the 3 same proteins in them that the COVID does, because they're all the coronavirus family. But COVID has this third, this spike protein that locks into the angiotensin receptor sites, and which is unique from the common cold. But because they weren't just testing for that, they were thinking that they had 30-40% of the country, with antibodies. Well, then they got the more sophisticated test, and we're starting to see this here in the United States as well. There were some places that were using these old tests, or these commercial tests that the FDA did not approve, that were sold by the millions. I mean, the CDC is combining those dysfunctional test numbers with the real test numbers to give Trump his millions and millions of tests. But in any case, that's kind of a digression. But, the bottom line is that when Sweden actually tested, they found that after 6 months of just basically saying, okay, we're going to shut the high schools and the colleges, and we're going to close things like theaters and, no big gatherings, and we encourage people to social distance, but no laws. Now, in Sweden, people generally do what the government says because the government is very responsive to them. The government is Sweden, right? I mean, people trust their government. And so there was a lot of social distancing, but still what they found is that only 7% of their population has herd immunity. And they have the highest death rate in Scandinavia massively, and one of the highest death rates in the world. And so the Swedes are sitting around going, whoa, maybe this wasn't such a good idea. But with Trump, he's still running on this old, Hancock, Tors Tager, or whatever the guy's name is in Sweden, the economist. He's still running on their idea of herd immunity, as far as I can tell. He wants to get as many people infected as possible in the red states so that by November they will have herd immunity and they can go vote. Yeah, some of their grandparents may have died, but, we're talking about, generally speaking, healthy white people here. And, all the news reports are saying, hey, it's black people who are dying 3 to 1 against white people. And it's old people who are dying, like, more than half, more than a third in most states, more than half in some states, really old people. And so, I'm a 40-year-old white guy who's a Trump voter, and I'm not old and I'm not black, and so why do I care? And if you watch the news coverage over the weekend, you saw a lot of that, where they were going to these places that were packed with people and sticking microphones in their faces and saying, why aren't you wearing a mask? What do you think? And one guy says, well, I'm not wearing a mask because I'm not afraid. Well, it's not about being afraid. It's about infecting your friends and family. Another guy says, I'm not wearing a mask because the president isn't wearing a mask. If he doesn't care, why should I care? So, this is basically the story, and he's counting on Democrats and other well-informed voters to try to avoid getting sick, thus staying sheltered in place for another 5, 6, 7 months until November, and to continue believing that masks and social distancing are vital, so they'll be reluctant to go to the polls this November. And that perfectly explains why Trump went nuts when Gavin Newsom in California mailed absentee ballot applications to everybody in the state. The RNC sued him for that. And why Governor Whitmer, Gretchen Whitmer, the Democratic governor of Michigan, when she sent out 7.7 ballot applications to everybody in the state, Trump started trashing her and saying, oh, this is going to be election fraud, right? But there is a downside. There is a danger to his strategy. And therefore, what he's doing right here is he's placing a very, very high stakes bet. And my question to you is, do you think he's going to win this bet or not? And his bet is that if the red states and the swing states can get past that infection peak this summer and early fall, particularly among, maskless followers of Fox and right-wing hate radio, he may end up with a good turnout for the election. On the other hand, as the death rates rise in these states, if some of these governors can't help him hide the statistics, we know of 5 governors right now that are hiding statistics, but, hey, he's got 20 red states, right, or more. If those governors can't help him hide the statistics and the news media begins to show what's going on, Trump will be seen as Herbert Hoover, a doddering, ineffectual, didn't get anything done guy during a serious crisis. And Americans don't vote for ineffectual leaders. So we'll see. But I mean, the fact that he's demanding that the RNC, the Republican convention, be held in North Carolina with people packed shoulder to shoulder to the rafters proves that he's committed to this herd immunity strategy. Now, here's the problem. If this thing has a fatality rate of 1%, and if he can infect half of Americans who are Republicans, half of Americans, that's 160 million Americans roughly, half of them is 80,000, 80 million. If he can infect 80 million people at a 1% infection rate, you're talking about 800,000 dead people. At a 2% infection rate, you're talking about 1.6 million dead people. And it looks like the infection rate, or the death rate rather, versus the infection rate in the United States is way above 2%. So is he going to get away? If he tries to kill a couple million Americans and succeeds, will he get away with it?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I mean, are Republicans going to say, yeah, okay, we're willing to see 1 million or 2 million people die in order to reelect Trump?